I never thought a moment like this would actually happen to me. If you had told me a few months ago that my quiet, lazy, always sleepy house cat would end up saving me from something I never even imagined was happening inside my own home, I would have laughed it off. But that night, when everything changed, I stopped laughing forever about things like cats sensing danger or animals knowing things we don't. I learned the hard way that instincts aren't random, and sometimes the smallest creature in the room is the only one paying attention. It started 3 days before everything unfolded. My cat, Milo, had been acting strange. And I don't mean the usual weird cat behavior like zooming at 3 a.m. or knocking objects off counters. No. This time it was different. He kept pacing around the hallway, stopping at the same spot over and over again. He would sit there, his body tense, tail twitching as if something was bothering him. But whenever I checked, there was nothing. Just a quiet hallway, the same as always. I told myself maybe there was a spider hiding somewhere, or maybe he was just bored. But deep down, I could tell he wasn't acting out of boredom. That first night, I remember waking up around 2 a.m. because I heard Milo scratching the door of my bedroom. Not clawing to get in, more like hitting the door in an urgent rhythm, something I'd never seen him do before. When I opened the door, he ran straight past me and jumped onto the bed, then stared right at me with wide eyes. Not cute eyes, not sleepy eyes, alert eyes. It made my stomach twist. He kept staring at the hallway, then back at me, then at the hallway again, as if trying to pull me into his worry. I sat up, rubbed my face, and told him to calm down. He didn't. Instead, he jumped down again and ran to the hallway, stopping at the exact same spot. I followed him, tired and confused. The house felt colder than usual. Quiet. Too quiet. Milo pressed his nose to the floor and sniffed, then jerked his head toward the wall like he wanted me to notice something. I touched the wall, just in case, but it felt normal. No vibration, no sound, no heat. I sighed, told Milo he was being dramatic, and went back to bed. He didn't follow me. That alone should have been enough to tell me something was wrong. Normally, Milo never lets me sleep alone. But I didn't take the hint. I just closed my eyes and went back to sleep. The next morning, Milo was still in the hallway. He looked tired, almost as if he hadn't slept at all. I picked him up, and he didn't resist, which was unusual because he's usually the type who only wants affection on his terms. He leaned into my chest and purred softly, but his eyes, they kept drifting back to that same spot. I started feeling uneasy, but I brushed it off. Maybe he heard mice in the walls. Maybe something smelled weird. Cats notice things we don't. That's what I told myself. The second night was worse. Milo didn't scratch the bedroom door. He slammed himself against it. I woke up terrified, thinking something was attacking him. When I opened the door, he bolted inside and yowled, a sound I had never heard come out of him before. It wasn't a meow. It wasn't angry. It was a warning. Instinctively, my heart began to race. I got up, turned on the hallway light, and walked toward the spot he kept obsessing over. Milo followed me, but this time he stayed close, brushing against my legs, his tail low, stiff, and trembling. I put my ear to the wall, and for a second, just a second, I heard something faint, a subtle clicking, almost like something tapping lightly behind the plaster. I pulled back, unsure if I had imagined it. I tried again. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the house settling. When I turned around, Milo was staring at me as if begging me to understand. But I didn't. Not yet. The next morning, I called my friend Daniel, who knew about this sort of stuff. He was a maintenance guy and had seen things with wiring, leaks, pests, you name it. When I told him about Milo's behavior, he jokingly said, "Maybe your house is haunted," and laughed. I didn't laugh. When he came over, he inspected the hallway. He checked for loose panels, dampness, anything that could explain noise or smell. But he found nothing. "Probably nothing," he said. "Cats get weird sometimes." He shrugged, left, and I tried to move on with my day. But Milo didn't stop. If anything, he got more intense. Every time I walked down the hallway, he would dart ahead of me, block my path, and stare at me with that same tense posture. At night, he refused to sleep. He kept patrolling between my bedroom and that wall. His fur stood up more easily, and sometimes he hissed at absolutely nothing. The house felt heavier, like the air had changed somehow. Even I began to walk through the hallway faster, not wanting to linger there. By the third night, something happened that made me realize Milo wasn't being dramatic. He was trying to protect me from something inside the house. I had fallen asleep watching TV on the couch. The living room was warm, the lights dim, and Milo was lying at my feet. I don't remember drifting off, but I woke up suddenly to Milo jumping onto my chest with enough force to knock the breath out of me. His claws weren't out. He didn't hurt me, but the impact jolted me awake. His ears were pinned back, his eyes wide, and he let out the lowest growl I had ever heard from him. Then he turned his head sharply toward the hallway. That's when I heard it clearly. Not a tap this time. Not a faint sound I could pretend I imagined. A scraping. A steady, slow scraping coming from behind the wall. My entire body froze. Milo pressed himself against me, shaking. I could feel his heart pounding as fast as mine. I held him and listened, unable to move. The sound kept going, slow and deliberate, like something was pushing or dragging inside the wall. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling, and took a few steps toward the sound. Milo didn't like that. He ran in front of me and blocked the way again, but I stepped around him, heart hammering. The wall looked normal. Nothing had changed, but the sound was real. Suddenly it stopped. The silence hit harder than the noise. Milo didn't relax. He backed away slowly, his eyes fixed on the wall as if expecting something to come through it. I stood there for a long moment, terrified of what I had just heard. Finally, I reached for my phone and called Daniel again. His voice was groggy. It was almost midnight. But when he heard the fear in mine, he agreed to stop by the next morning. I slept with the hallway light on that night. Milo didn't sleep at all. He sat up on the bed, facing the hallway the entire time, alert and motionless. The next day, Daniel arrived with tools. When I described the sound I heard, he stopped joking. He pulled out a small device to check for wiring issues, but the readings were normal. He checked the pipes. Nothing. Finally, he tapped along the wall, listening. When he tapped one specific area, the same spot Milo had fixated on, the sound seemed slightly different. Hollow, like something wasn't sitting right behind that part of the wall. "What's back here?" he asked. "Just empty space, I think." "This is an interior wall." He frowned. "If something is moving in there, it shouldn't be." Milo sat nearby, watching him work, his tail wrapped around himself tightly. He didn't make a sound, but his eyes followed Daniel's every move. When Daniel crouched near the floor, Milo stepped closer and touched the area with his paw, as if showing him exactly where to look. Daniel glanced at him. "Your cat's pretty insistent." "Yeah," I said. "He hasn't slept in days." Daniel started cutting a small square in the drywall. Milo backed up, tense, but didn't run. Dust spilled out as the panel loosened. When Daniel pulled it away, expecting maybe a nest or a leak or something harmless, he froze. His expression changed instantly. "What is that?" he whispered. I leaned forward but couldn't get a clear view. He reached in with a flashlight and angled it around. For a moment he didn't say anything. Milo hissed, a low, terrified hiss, and backed up behind my legs. Daniel finally pulled back, his face pale. "We need to call someone," he said quietly. "This isn't normal. Something's going on in here." That was all he said. He refused to give me details until he verified a few things. He covered the opening temporarily and told me not to disturb it. Then he left. Milo stayed glued to me the rest of the day, refusing to leave my side even when I moved around the house. I kept thinking about Daniel's expression, the shock, the confusion, the fear. By evening, I couldn't sit still. The silence in the hallway felt heavier than ever. Milo stood in the doorway with me, tail low, body tense, staring at the temporary cover on the wall. At one point, he let out a soft sound, not a meow, but something between a whine and a plea, like he wanted me to leave the house entirely, and part of me thought about doing exactly that. But I didn't. That night, the fourth night, everything finally came to a breaking point. I had gone to bed early, hoping exhaustion would let me sleep through the anxiety. Milo curled beside me, finally seeming calmer, though still alert. I had just started drifting off when I felt the mattress vibrate lightly. Milo lifted his head. His ears twitched. Then he stood up slowly and turned toward the hallway again. I held my breath. At first, there was nothing. Then the sound returned. Not scraping this time, thumping. Soft but unmistakable thumping from inside the wall. Milo darted off the bed, ran to the hallway door, and looked back at me with a desperate cry. I got up, heart slamming in my chest, and followed him. We reached the hallway. The sound sped up, faster, louder, more urgent. Milo arched his back, fur fluffed, a deep growl rumbling out of him. I stared at the wall, frozen, as the thumping grew stronger, like something was trying to push through. I stepped back slowly, reaching for my phone with shaking hands. And then, suddenly, the sound stopped. Not faded, stopped, completely. Milo didn't relax. He continued growling at the wall as if the danger hadn't passed. I didn't dare go closer. The house felt colder than ever. I called Daniel again, but he didn't answer. I left him a message, my voice trembling, telling him the noises got worse. Hours passed before I finally fell asleep, sitting upright on the couch with Milo guarding the hallway like he was protecting me from something I still didn't understand. The next morning, Daniel called back. He sounded different, nervous even. He told me he was coming over with someone else who needed to see the wall. That phrase alone made my stomach twist. When he arrived, he wasn't alone. A building inspector came with him. They both looked serious. Milo didn't leave my side for a second. Daniel walked them to the hallway and removed the temporary cover from the wall. The inspector shined his flashlight inside and frowned. "Yeah," he muttered. "This isn't good." "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking. They didn't answer immediately. The inspector backed up and looked at me with a tight expression. "Something inside your wall has been tampered with." My heart dropped. Milo pressed his body against my leg, trembling, eyes locked on the open cavity in the wall. "What do you mean tampered with?" I asked. The inspector pointed the flashlight again. "This wasn't caused by an animal or water damage. Someone did this." I felt the room tilt. "Someone?" He nodded slowly. "There are signs of forced movement behind the paneling, and something else. I'll need to open more of the wall to confirm." My mind raced. Someone? Inside my wall? Or someone had been messing with it? Milo walked forward carefully, sniffed the opening, then let out a sharp cry. He ran back to me, tail puffed, shaking violently. That was when the inspector's expression hardened. "I need to open the lower section," he said. "It looks like something was hidden here intentionally." My throat tightened. Milo knew. Somehow he always knew. What they eventually revealed behind that wall, and why Milo had been warning me nonstop, was something I never imagined could happen inside my own home. Something that changed the way I see my house, my safety, and my cat forever. And the moment they opened the second section of the wall, everything finally made sense. When the inspector began cutting into the lower part of the wall, Milo didn't move from my side. His fur was still puffed, but he had stopped growling. Instead, he watched every movement with an intensity that felt almost human, like he already understood what was about to come to light. I didn't. Not even close. I stood there with my hands shaking, trying to prepare myself for anything. Pests, wiring, pipes, mold, anything normal. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't going to be normal. Milo had sensed something for days, something he couldn't communicate in words, and the sound of that thumping still echoed in my mind, like a warning I failed to understand. Drywall dust filled the air as the inspector widened the opening. When he finally removed the loosened panel, he shined the flashlight inside and stiffened. His shoulders tightened, his breath hitched, and for a long moment, he didn't say a single word. Daniel leaned over his shoulder to get a look, and his face quickly mirrored the same expression, shock mixed with disbelief. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stepped closer, afraid of what I was about to see. Inside the cavity of the wall, pushed down toward the inner foundation, were objects that absolutely should not have been there. A thick bundle of wiring was twisted and cut in ways that made no sense, as if someone had tried to reroute power or disrupt something in the house. Old insulation was torn apart and shoved back in at awkward angles. But that wasn't the part that froze me in place. What stopped me cold were the small metal components scattered inside, hidden deliberately, wedged between pipes and wooden beams. Pieces of what looked like sensors. I felt the blood drain from my face. The inspector reached inside with a gloved hand, picked up one of the metal fragments, and examined it with a stern expression. "This wasn't part of your house," he said quietly. "Someone put this here." My mouth went dry. "Put what, exactly?" He frowned deeper. "It looks like someone installed a makeshift device here. Something that shouldn't be on any property, let alone inside a wall." I stumbled back a step. Milo let out a tiny, distressed sound and followed me. "A device?" I whispered. "What kind of device?" The inspector hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's not active anymore," he said slowly. "But whatever it was, it had wiring connected deep into your electrical lines. That could explain the noises you heard. It might have been malfunctioning. Malfunctioning. The scraping, the tapping, the thumping. The sounds that kept me awake. The sounds Milo had tried to warn me about from the very beginning. But who would put something like that in my house? I asked, voice trembling. Why? Daniel exchanged a glance with the inspector, then looked at me with a seriousness I'd never seen from him. "You said you bought this place a bit over a year ago, right?" he asked. "Yes." "And you haven't done any major renovations?" "No." He exhaled slowly. "Then these weren't put in recently." That hit harder than anything else. My mind raced with possibilities I didn't want to consider. The inspector continued pulling pieces out of the cavity. Wires, fragments of metal, small plastic housings, each one more concerning than the last. "I need to take these in for analysis," he said. "I can't say exactly what they were for until we look at them properly. But whatever they weren't harmless." My stomach twisted. Could it have been dangerous? He paused. Potentially. That word echoed through the hallway like a threat. Milo hissed softly at the open wall, then ran to the living room as if he couldn't stand being near it any longer. I followed him, sinking onto the couch with shaky legs. He immediately jumped up beside me and pressed himself into my side. His body was warm and trembling, and for the first time in days, he closed his eyes as if he finally felt like his warning had been heard. Daniel came to sit across from me, Whatever this was, your cat knew something was wrong before any of us did. I looked down at Milo, gently brushing my hand over his back. He tried to tell me, I whispered, and I didn't listen. Daniel shook his head. You listened enough. If you had ignored it completely, who knows how long that thing would have stayed hidden. The inspector spent another hour examining the rest of the hallway before confirming that the rest of the walls were clear. The tampered area was localized to that one hidden cavity, but that didn't make me feel better. Knowing someone had placed something inside the wall long before I ever lived there made me feel unsafe in my own home. After the inspector and Daniel left, I sat in silence for a long time. Milo stayed curled beside me, finally sleeping for the first time in nearly 48 hours. Even while he slept, his paw rested over my leg as if making sure I wasn't going anywhere. I couldn't stop replaying the past few days in my head. The pacing, the yowling, the guarding, the desperate attempts to pull me toward the hallway. He had been trying to tell me something wasn't right. Something hiding just inches away, separated from us only by drywall and ignorance. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Every creak in the house felt louder. Every gust of wind against the windows felt suspicious. I kept glancing at the hallway, half expecting another sound, even though the inspector had confirmed the cavity was safe now. Milo slept against me, breathing softly, his tiny body exhausted from days of stress and vigilance. The following afternoon, the inspector called me with an update. His tone was urgent. I need you to come to the office, he said. We've examined the items we removed from your wall. My chest tightened. And? He hesitated. It was definitely some kind of monitoring device. Not professional. Homemade. Crude. But functional. A wave of nausea hit me. How long do you think it was there? Years, he answered. Possibly before you bought the house. I sat down slowly, gripping the phone. Was it still working? No, he said. It had power issues. That's likely what caused the noises you heard. The failing components reacting to electrical inconsistencies. My breath shook. Milo had been warning me about something hidden, deteriorating, malfunctioning. But something that once had a purpose. Could it have been dangerous? I asked again, barely managing the words. At one point, yes, he replied. But not anymore. Still, you should consider having a full audit of your wiring and structure. I thanked him, hung up, and immediately scooped Milo into my arms. He blinked up at me sleepily, confused at first, then leaned into me with a soft purr. I knew he didn't fully understand what the inspector had told me, but he knew something had changed, that the threat he'd sensed for days was finally gone. For the next weeks, my house felt different. Lighter, safer. And Milo. He went back to being himself again, sleeping in patches of sun, napping on the back of the couch, stealing my socks for no reason. But sometimes, at night, I'd catch him staring thoughtfully at the hallway, as if remembering the days when he had to be on guard. And every time I saw him do that, I felt a chill run down my spine, thinking about how close I had been to never discovering what was hidden there. If Milo hadn't acted out of pure instinct, if he hadn't warned me the way he did, who knows how long I would have lived in that house without knowing the truth buried in its walls. One night, after everything had calmed down, I was brushing Milo before bed. His eyes were half closed, enjoying the attention. I looked at him and whispered, "You saved me." He opened one eye, bumped his head gently against my chest, and let out a soft, contented rumble. Maybe he didn't understand the words, but he understood the emotion behind them. A few days later, the inspector stopped by again to finalize some reports. Before leaving, he crouched down to pet Milo and said, "You have a smart one here. Don't underestimate what animals can sense." I never will again. To this day, every time Milo suddenly perks up or stares into a corner, I pay attention. He may not speak, but he communicates everything with his body, his instincts, his fear, and his courage. And after what happened, after what he prevented, I trust him more than I trust most people. What he sensed inside that wall wasn't something any person would have noticed, not through sight, sound, or routine. It took an animal's intuition to reveal it. Something hidden, something wrong, something someone once put there intentionally. And the fact that Milo stayed awake for days, guarding me, pushing me away from danger long before I understood it, that's something I'll be grateful for forever. He wasn't acting strange. He was protecting me, and because of him, I learned a truth many people overlook. Sometimes the greatest warnings don't come from alarms or tools or instincts of our own. They come from the quiet presence of an animal who loves you enough to stand between you and something you cannot see. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you to pay attention to the small signals, the ones we sometimes ignore. Because sometimes, they're the difference between danger and safety. I appreciate you staying with me until the end of this video. If this story touched you or made you look at animals a little differently, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps this channel grow and brings more stories like this to life. Thank you again for watching, and take care.